In this video, I'm going to answer the question, what is working in cold outreach today? Because if you ask this question publicly, you will get a million different responses, many of them contradicting each other. But I'm going to answer it to a point where you will never have to ask this question again, and you will simply know what works for you. Why should you listen to me? My name is Michael Bohannes. I'm the founder of the Alpha Lead Academy. Collectively, together with our clients, we send about 100,000 cold emails a month, and our cold outreach has now generated millions of dollars in revenue. So if you're a little bit confused about how to do cold outreach, cold email, cold calling, or cold DMs, and you ask this question publicly, then one person will tell you that you need to use AI to personalize. Another person says, no, make sure that it does not look like AI so that people realize you did it for them. Even others will tell you that it's all about de-risking the offer for the prospect and creating a really good offer in the first place. And then finally, somebody will say that they tried it all and that cold outreach is dead. So you'll be left completely confused and completely unsure if it's even worth jumping in the pool. And to make matters worse, what absolutely can work for one person can totally bomb for another. We have had client pairs where both of them used exactly the same tactic, sold exactly the same thing. One of them succeeded and the other one failed, which of course makes sense, right? If you are Tony Robbins and you sell a private one-to-one session to CEOs and you're going to sell it at $500 an hour, then of course you're going to get 100% rate of takers. Whereas if you're somebody in mom's basement and you're 20 years old and you will sell strategy consulting to Fortune 500 CEOs, you're not going to get a single taker. So there are a few key variables: what you sell, who you sell it to, how you sell it, and who you are, that make all the difference. Tweaking these variables is how you make cold outreach work for yourself. Once you understand that, the great news is that you will be able to adapt your cold outreach and make it work not only now in September 2025, which is when I'm recording this, but pretty much at any time in the future. I am very certain that even 5, 10, 20 years from now, when everything will look very different and all the communication tools we use are going to be replaced, I can guarantee you, as long as you can sell something to someone on a one-on-one basis, what I'm about to tell you will be applicable and you can still use it. So that's the good news. The bad news is that what works for you is unfortunately not a straightforward answer. I'd be lying if I told you that for you, you just need to use a specific tool, send 1,000 emails a day, offer a quick short hook. It might not work for you, especially if your target market is a little bit smaller. You will have to put in some thinking, tweaking, and testing. But even this bad news is kind of good news, because you'll realize that 99% of people are lazy and inconsistent, and you are in the 1% who actually makes things work. So ultimately, you're going to win. So let me hop over to Miro and introduce you to the Alpha Lead Academy Cold Outreach Meta Framework. It's quite a mouthful. This is now going to completely resolve the mystery of what's working in cold outreach right now. This is the framework. These are the moving parts that make cold outreach work, and I'll take you through all of these elements one by one. And here's how you can make this useful for yourself, right? You have to imagine that all of those vertical lines are like dials on a radio device. And if they are arranged and dialed in a particular way, then you'll receive the signal, meaning strangers will respond positively to you and you will book sales calls. There are infinite ways to set up those dials, infinite combinations, just like in a chess game, and only a few of them will be right for you. And your job is to actually, through testing, first some conceptual thinking, and then testing, learning from the tests, listening to the signals that you're getting. It's not a binary, either yes or no. You get a little bit of signals, but then gradually dialing in and getting closer and finally catching the signal. Okay, before we dive in, let's cover these 4 points at the top here. First of all, you can dramatically increase your fortune in this framework by going from red to green. Okay, we'll cover this just so that you know a lot of these things you always have it. In most cases, you have a choice. In some, you don't. Like, for example, what your level of experience is, right? You don't have that, but you can mitigate for that. You can sort of de-risk yourself by going from red to green. And you'll see what I mean by that when we get in. Also, the framework looks at revenue generating potential, not just call booking potential. You can book a ton of calls till the cows come home, but you have to be able to close. So I'm looking at it holistically. Also, there are many ways to fail and only a few ways to succeed, right? So there's if there's a billion different combinations on this framework, there's maybe 957 million of them to fail and a couple of them where you can succeed. Okay, so there's way more ways to fail, and your job is to test, and through logic and thinking about it before, you can figure out those methods that will work better for you. And then finally, working with us can shorten the time frame until you break through, right? We don't sell a specific outbound method. We are proficient in all of them. We help you uncover what works for you based on 180 plus case studies and an offer vault that we have collected over the last 5 years. And by the way, this is what all advisory services in this space should be selling. They should say, okay, what has worked for your kind of business? And then let's try to hew as much to that as possible. Let's just copy what has worked in the past. And I find that many service providers in the cold outreach space, they just have their one method that happens to work right now, and they just try to teach it to everybody, which is fine. But if it does not work for you, then you're out of luck. So let's go into the details. First of all, there's what you sell, then there's who you sell it to, how you're selling it, and how good you are as a service provider. Okay, so let's look at what you sell. What problem you sell towards is the first thing. In which area do you provide your service, your B2B service, right? We found that anytime you try to sell anything that has to do with strategy, it's freaking difficult, right? I always equate it to the inner sanctum of the company. The closer you get to the inner sanctum of the company, which tends to be about strategy, like finances, product strategy, product development, and so on. Everything that is really, really at the core, where most companies would not just open the kimono to a person who approaches them via cold outreach. Much harder to sell because people think like, well, like, who are you, right? Then anything that has to do with mindset, motivation, branding, and content is always a little bit more difficult to sell, especially why? Because there's no ROI. It's hard to prove ROI in those areas. Operational efficiency is better because you can prove ROI. However, there is not this strong sense of leverage that you can get through sales and lead gen, right? So that's why anything that has to do with growth is always much easier to sell than things that have to do with operational efficiency or, things like branding and content motivation. So what should you take away from that? If you currently want to sell strategy services, I would strongly recommend that you don't, unless you already have a network and you can, get a TEDx talk and you've written a book and God knows what, and you get enough business. This is not for you if you don't have enough business, right? But if you do not have enough business, then try to somehow tweak yourself to go from strategy and to go more towards the lead gen side of things, right? Even if we just recently had that. We had somebody who wanted to be a fractional chief revenue officer. Right. And yes, I'm sure you can install a lot of good and cool systems and has to do with strategy and sort of how to organize, sales ops, etc. But because he didn't have a huge amount of success stories yet, we just suggested to him, dude, how about just go straight to lead gen, just build funnels for people. Okay. It's just so much easier to sell, and strategy you can always do once you've worked with somebody for a long time. They've repeat purchase from you, then you can start maybe upselling yourself as a chief strategy or chief revenue officer and do some fractional work for them, right? So really important what problem you sell towards. Most people don't attack that. They just assume that what they sell is cast in stone, and then they kind of just accept that and they struggle getting clients because they sell something that is strategy adjacent. Good. Next thing, your proposed solution. What's your special sauce, right? So there's like a million different things here, of course, right? But it can really make a difference if you just, for example, sell sales training, okay? And you just sell, John Smith, my own sales training technique. Tends to not sell as well as if you were to say, hey, I have studied the Wolf of Wall Street's sales techniques, and I totally believe in them. I totally, buy them. And if you do too, if you like the Wolf of Wall Street, I'm going to teach your team to sell like him, right? That will polarize your audience. Not everybody likes the Wolf of Wall Street, but those who do will accept it more. So your proposed solution matters a lot. For example, we've had one client who's very much into the topic of theory of constraints, right? And for any kind of operations consulting, this is an attractive thing, because if you were to approach people and you say, hey, I can solve your operational bottlenecks, that's kind of sure, okay, but what kind of method do you use? If you have a strong bias towards the theory of constraints and you can prove that it's superior to other theories, you will have more takers. You will get more calls booked. So anytime you have a specific solution, that can help you with cold outreach, because people will think, yeah, it's a common problem that people face, but we've tried to solve it in many different ways, but we have not yet tried theory of constraints. So let's give this person a shot. That's how prospects will think. If you have an idea about a specific solution, you'll probably succeed more. Good. What you sell next, how quickly you can deliver ROI from slow to fast. Anytime if you can in any way accelerate the point of first value delivery, do it. Okay, if you will sell more if you say we'll get you the first leads in 14 days rather than 90 days, you will book more calls. Things will work easier for you. Then, how you deliver the solution. Coaching and advisory services are harder to sell, obviously, because the client has to do the work. If you sell done for you services, easier to sell, not as easy to scale, of course. And then there's the middle ground, done with you, where you do roll up your sleeves and you help the client, with some aspects of the work, but mostly it's on them. Then there's a question of how you de-risk it for the client. For example, if you only worked on a success fee, then you will book a lot of calls, you will close a lot of deals. It will take you, there's many downsides to working on a success fee. But if you just want to get some experience and get some success stories and actually learn, then this, of course, is by far the best method. One person who I know, very inexperienced, 21 years old, and he sold lead gen services purely based on a success fee. And he was open about that. He was booking calls like there's no tomorrow because people just accepting this. And the burden is now much more on him to figure out who is worthy of his time, because he shouldn't invest in every single person who comes his way because it's such an attractive offer. So the levels of de-risking it for the client, if currently you're not breaking through with your cold outreach, and let's say you do not offer a money back guarantee, right? Also, you ask for a long-term commitment and there is upfront payment, right? Those are the worst terms for the prospect. Well, then how about you move towards the green? You can, for example, start offering monthly payments. It's still a long-term commitment and there's no money back guarantee, but at least you de-risk it a little bit by not asking for 12,000 upfront, but for 1,000 a month. Then the next one would be there's no money back guarantee, but they can cancel anytime. So there is no long-term commitment. Then there could be some kind of conditional money back guarantee. We'll give you your money back provided that you do XYZ amount of work. That's, by the way, how we work, right? Then there's the unconditional money back guarantee, completely satisfaction based. Careful. This also can be a bit of a, own goal. If you were to do this, you could be shooting yourself in the foot by using a satisfaction based money back guarantee, especially when you sell something unquantifiable like mindset, motivation, anything like that. Because if it's satisfaction based, most people are not psychopaths. They will not want to put the burden on you. What if I am unsatisfied? I don't want the awkwardness of asking for money back purely based on a subjective feeling. They are much more easy to ask for money back if they didn't get an objectively verifiable result. But for pure satisfaction, not so good. And many people factor that in and then they won't work with you. Also, it signals, because you as the vendor are willing to put all the power into the hands of the client, it signals a certain level of desperation. Okay, so use with caution. It is possible. Some people respond well to that. But I think if you're willing to give a satisfaction-based money back guarantee, you might as well also charge a success fee only. So there's many different scenarios. You have to assess, when in doubt, start with a success fee and then vet the people who come in. Don't offer it to everyone. This is also what most people believe, that if you offer success fee, doesn't mean that every single person who responds to you now have the legal obligation to take them on. No, it's just an invitation for a conversation. They respond to you, you take them on a call, you take them through a series of steps, validate that they are serious, validate that they are, good and that they probably can deliver value to their clients, and then you can take them on a success fee. Okay? You can also offer satisfaction-based guarantee, but you know what the downsides are. Okay, and then final point in what you sell, what your pricing is, right? If you're premium, of course, it's going to be more difficult. If you're competing on price, then of course, you'll have an easier time, obviously closing, but also in terms of booking calls, you can then maybe signal that you are, lower cost, and more affordable. We have the affordable option. You will book more calls. That's a given, right? Question is if the clients are going to be very good, but this is all about, can you close deals? So if all of those dials are perfectly dialed in and you're still not booking calls, I would honestly say just try to compete on price just to get something, right? You don't need to do this all the time. You can just get a couple of clients first, but then gradually you can always increase your prices. Okay, so this is what you sell. Tweak it if you are not booking calls. Just see which of these areas you can adjust and you will book more calls. Now, next thing, who you sell to. The niche, of course, matters a lot, right? We've had, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have had 2 clients who sold exactly the same thing. One of them sold to agencies and the other one sold to B2B SaaS. It was all about revenue retention and upsells. Arguably, both of those types of clients should have an equal interest in retention and upsells. It turns out that agencies are not particularly good at it, and it's not their core function. B2B SaaS consider this to be a little bit of their bread and butter. They need to know how to do this. And so selling retention and upsells to B2B SaaS turns out to be much more difficult than to agencies, right? We didn't know that. We learned it by working with these two clients. And this could have been one reason. Another reason why our clients had these different results could also very well be, and that comes later, who you are. The person who was selling to agencies had a ton of experience in agency land. The person who was selling to B2B SaaS only had, let's say, a little bit of peripheral knowledge. He used to work in a big corporate before he had started a SaaS startup once, but he was not, a versed operator in B2B SaaS. So that could have contributed to it. I think the main reason why it did not work is because of that. It's much more core competency of a B2B SaaS company to do retention and upsells. Okay. Now, of course, there's many more niches that you sell into. And this, I have not ranked them, right? This is usually, it goes from red to green. This one you see does not have a red or green. It doesn't really matter who you sell to. It very much depends on what you sell, how you will succeed, right? If you sell into manufacturing, you're going to succeed with different things than if you sell to post-Series A startups. That's obvious. So there's a lot of different niches. All I'm saying here, if you're not breaking through with your outbound, then consider selling to a different niche, right? That is what our client, who actually was pitching B2B SaaS companies, ended up doing. He stopped selling to B2B SaaS companies, started selling to service providers, and boom, his fortunes changed. So the next one is decision maker in that niche, who you are targeting. You could be targeting the CEO, functional leaders, investors as multipliers, right? Non-budget holders as champions, especially works in, let's say, product. If you have some kind of cool product solution, you can start speaking to the product people who will then carry your message upward. I'm not a big fan of these kind of split avatars, but sometimes you have no other choice, right? Sometimes just changing the decision maker and who you approach. Of course, you also have to tailor the offer accordingly. Very important. Don't pitch the same thing to a CEO as you would to a functional leader, but sometimes this can be the difference, who you pitch. Then company size. Of course, it's much harder to break through in a huge corporate than selling to solopreneurs. That's obvious. Of course, the solopreneurs can pay you less, but this is all about booking calls and closing deals. You're not going to book calls with cold outreach by targeting Google or Nestle. Okay, that's just not going to happen, especially if you're early stage. Yes, there will be some people on X who claim that they can do this. It's very unlikely. It's like the masterclass. Focus on smaller companies by default. The smaller you go, the more likely you are to book sales calls with strangers if the company is small. Geography, obviously, go from lower income countries to high income countries. This is mostly about like closing deals in general and making money. Yes, you can. It's definitely easier to book a call in low income countries. And especially if you are in a lower income country, always start closer to home. We once worked with a company in Georgia, the country of Georgia. And there, of course, it makes sense that you first get a couple of success stories in the country, and then you start sort of gradually going outside, sort of radiating out, get a couple of neighboring countries first. And then you go into Western Europe and the US. So that's a little bit of you have to be strategic about it. It's not always like this. If you are from a low income country and then immediately starting to sell to New Yorkers, it's going to be more difficult. Okay. Then how well they know you. Total strangers versus hardcore fans of yours. Obviously, this is not about cold outreach anymore if it's hardcore fans. But my whole point here is that if you currently sell to total strangers, you can help yourself by selling to people who once received a lead magnet from you, for example. If you don't have that, well, create a lead magnet, send it to a few people, give some value up front. You will see it's going to be much easier. So especially if you have a small TAM, total addressable market, if that is the case, try to give value first before you reach out to them. Okay, so the who you sell to matters also, of course. So how well people know you, how much value they've received from you, of course, makes a difference in cold outreach. Yes, I know this stretches the definition of cold outreach. It's not cold outreach anymore, it's warm, but still I wanted to bring it up here. Okay, next big chapter, how you are selling it. There, of course, are multiple pain points and trigger points, which usually then form basis of the trigger, the angle of what you are selling. So there's always the offer that you're selling, what is the result that you're promising, and then there's the pain point that you're triggering to get attention. For example, in our case, one of the most successful pain points that we are triggering is, do you hate depending on referrals? Many of our clients struggle with that. This is their biggest bugaboo, and we always address this. Do you hate depending on your network and referrals for business? We help you book sales calls with strangers, and our offer is you will, after 6 months with us, you will reliably book sales calls with strangers or your money back. Right? That is one pain point. We've been riding that sucker for a long time now, right? There's several other pain points that we could be addressing: people's economic insecurity, their frustration with having been in coaching programs that sell them Facebook ads, for example. Nothing works for me. I cannot make it work. All of those are pain points that we could trigger. We have found that I hate depending on referrals works really best for us. Then what is the outreach tactic? This is the big one, right? This is now where we're going into which method should you be using? Should you be doing highly personalized conversational prospecting, right? The equivalent of approaching somebody at an event and starting a friendly conversation. You can do that on LinkedIn. It works extremely effectively. One of our clients had this was the record, a 20% call booking rate with complete strangers. Imagine he starts 5 conversations, he books 1 sales call. Right, that was pretty crazy. Our best ever was 10%. His was 20%. That is obviously the most successful one. Takes a lot of work and also takes, I find, a little bit of talent. You got to have a bit of a gift of the gab, especially if you used to be dating on dating apps and you have this, you're witty, you have some repartee. That can be a gold mine. Of course, not super scalable. But to get started, conversational prospecting is super, super useful. You can, of course, run LinkedIn automations, mass cold email, very high volume, sending thousands of emails a day. Then you could go completely the other way. Personalized cold emails with Looms, for example, where you create a video. I've described this in other videos, but you just go and you record a video on somebody's website and say, hey, I'm here on your website. Look, I'm reading something out. This is not AI, and we can do XYZ for you. Here's a short pitch. If you're interested, works really well. You can also do that. We've had several clients who made this work and who've, made, hundreds of thousands with just that. Then there's also the other way of getting videos done, which is AI generated video. Of course, there's many different tricks how you can, give the sense that it's personalized. I personally don't like them very much because I generally really dislike any form of deception and lying. And so I'd rather say, hey, I've made a video. If that's interesting, if this very topic is interesting, I think you will find these 3 minutes well spent. And then I just sent them a generic video if they respond. I know it's not the most sexy thing. I just find it always slightly odd if the relationship already starts on deception, right? And I know maybe I'm a bit of a hypocrite because yes, we do send emails from, names of people that don't exist, but I find that not really to be an issue. I do, once I take the conversation over, I really want this to be a genuine, authentic relationship, and starting it on this kind of lie that it's an AI generated video doesn't really sit well with me. I mean, we still do it. It's not the most ethically questionable thing. But if I can avoid it, I prefer not to do it. And then, of course, cold calling, there's many other methods here. And this is kind of the key thing you have to understand. Those are pretty much equivalent, right? You will learn a lot when you do conversational prospecting, but it's not that LinkedIn automation is superior to mass cold email. It's not that AI generated video is inherently superior to conversational prospecting. This is really where you have to test. Always you will get the most qualitative feedback on your offer with the unscalable methods. Right? So in conversational prospecting, especially when you have a friendly conversation with someone, you can even ask, hey, I saw that you didn't respond. Would you mind sharing why? And they will tell you if they're nice, which many people are, if they feel that it's a genuine person on the other side. Okay. So as far as the outreach tactic is concerned, this is of course a big choice. Be flexible, start with the more personalized ones, and then gradually work your way up to the more scalable ones. So the next point in how you're selling it is the tactics suitability for your TAM size. It seems a bit weird, but here's what I mean by that. I've met people who are selling to a total addressable market of 3,000, and they are blasting out cold emails at a rate of 300, 500 a day. And they're going to be done with that market, right? When you have a TAM of 3,000, they're going to be done with that market in 10 days, right? That's not cold outreach. I mean, you could cycle through the whole market, every 10 days, but at some point people will start wondering, like, who is this person? Those emails seem to be quite similar. When you have a TAM of 3,000, you should do hardcore personalized. The most extreme case of this I've seen was from a German consultant who has I kid you not, TAM of 100 companies. Those are very large companies, very specific ones in one specific geographic market. He waits for a specific trigger that happens about them. A new person gets hired, and he then pitches that person with an extremely highly personalized video, and he closes 2 deals of $250,000 each every year. So that is the most personalized I've ever seen, and he's very successful with this. Happily makes $500,000 for himself, and basically almost all of that is profit because he does the work himself. Successful guy. But that is the most extreme version. The other more extreme version is that you blast 5,000 people a day and you get 1.1% of hand raisers every day. That's also a possibility, right? You just have to be and make it suitable for your TAM size. And this is what I see this all the time. People don't know what their TAM is. Okay, they don't know how many, 90% of cases that I ask somebody, how many possible companies could you sell to in the world? Nobody knows. Okay, so just ask your GPT of choice, ChatGPT or Perplexity, whatever. Just ask them how many companies of this sort are there. And then also it will tell you a pretty big number. And then also you have to see, well, which of them can I find relatively easily? I go on LinkedIn, I go on Apollo, and if I search for CEOs of those kind of companies, this kind of size, exclude some geographies, how many will you find? That's your TAM. Okay, it's not difficult to find. Just be aware of who you're selling to. Also, by the way, quick digression here. If you have a very small TAM, don't run Facebook ads to them. Just make sure that your method is suitable for your TAM. Good. Next one. How well you're executing on the tactic. Of course, rookie, rockstar, you're going to get better if you test many different things. And for example, small things that you can do that will massively improve your success is how quickly you get back to somebody after they've replied positively. So you send an email, somebody replies, yes, I'm interested. If you reply to them within the next 5 minutes, your chances of success of booking a call are dramatically higher than if you respond to them 12 hours later. Okay, that is part of going from rookie to rockstar, is when you dial those little things gradually in. So how well you're executing on the tactic is also going to make a difference. And then also finally, how crowded the tactic niche combo is, right? If you're selling super, scaled email in the lead gen space, it's pretty tough. You're competing against many people. We're still doing it. It's successful, but we're also not, I don't know if we're rockstar, but we're definitely not in the rookie camp as far as execution on the tactic is concerned. Okay. So if you've seen that many people are using one specific tactics, when everybody zigs, try to zag and be a pioneer. You might also, it could be more risky and you might crash and burn, but also you could succeed. So test. This is where testing comes in. And then finally, how good you are as a service provider. Your level of credibility, such as how long you've been in business, your case studies, your social proof, how many you have. Super important. It can make a huge difference. Like one of our clients, as I mentioned, she has been very successful in the agency space. Having that kind of credibility, having some big brands on her resume made a huge difference in how she was booking calls. Okay. Then obviously professional work history. For some reason, even small companies tend to be somewhat impressed if you have a blue chip on your resume. So do test. Some people, scoff at that. Nobody will be, if you sell to blue collar workers, nobody will be impressed with your Harvard degree or your Google tenure. But it sometimes can work, especially if you sell to more, professional white collar services. Then your social media footprint, if you have a large following, if you're very successful with that, even outreach will be easier. People will go and check you out and think, wow, this person has 100,000 followers. They must know what they're talking about. Your company headcount, how many you are. Of course, if you're a solo player, you're going to be less successful than if you have many people on your team. And then your own growth trajectory. If you can show that, a year ago we were at this level, now we're at that level, you show growth trajectory, that also adds to your credibility. Then the next thing is copywriting and presentation skills. If you are very good in video, Looms, for example, when you record personalized videos for people, can make a huge difference. How charismatic and outgoing you are. We've had this. I don't know if I'm terribly charismatic on videos. It could also be that I'm the CEO of the company, but my personalized videos always performed way better than videos from anybody else who we've hired for that role. That's why we stopped doing them also, because I don't want to do them anymore. It's not a scalable thing. We're looking for more scalable things. And anytime we outsource it, it doesn't work as well. So copywriting and presentation skills, of course, matter. If you can become better as a public speaker, that definitely can help with personalized videos. Finally, or almost penultimate, how proactive and hungry you are. This is such an important aspect. And I always try to communicate this to my clients without it coming across as putting the blame on them. But we have seen this so often that people, when they come with their own ideas, hey, I tweaked this, I tried that, what do you think of that? It's so much easier. People will be so much more successful. You'll be so much more successful if you don't just kind of sit there, especially if you work with a coaching program and you just there, well, give me what's next. Oh, didn't work. What should I do now? Right? If you don't have this attitude and you said, yeah, this must be solvable, right? And you just look for things, you try to figure it out, you will be successful, right? It's super, super important. And that's why also, if you're really hungry, if you want to, make a lot of money, you're going to be way more successful with cold outreach than if you're saying, yeah, I could use a client or two more, but I'm fine. So how proactive and hungry you are makes a huge difference. And then also how open you are to new tech. If you're a bit of a scaredy cat, you say, oh my God, I don't want to touch this new technology. It's pretty easy. Like, things these days are so easy to learn, right? And there's, for everything that you don't understand, there's tutorials. And even if you don't want to do it, you can just get somebody on Fiverr for $20 an hour and they can help you with any tools that you want, right? And there's one guy, I like his YouTube content, Nick Sarayev. He also said, don't wait for months to learn something. Sit down, lock yourself up for a weekend, and you can learn practically any tool that now seems super scary. Okay, there's YouTube tutorials for everything. Worst case, you just pay somebody to explain you how to do something. And that's it. That is the cold outreach meta framework, answering the question, what will work for me in cold outreach? So now you'll never have to ask this question again, what is working in cold outreach? You just launch a cold outreach method, anything that sounds plausible, and you will get the first results. If they're not good, you just go ahead and tweak any of those variables from the red towards the green, and you test different things, right? You go from coaching to done for you. You go from non-personalized to personalized. You go towards the green, and then because green is usually unscalable. As you're seeing better results, you're getting some calls, you're closing deals, then you can again go back towards the red, because red is where it tends to be a little bit more scalable. And remember, the best kind of coaches in this space, or even agencies, they acknowledge this reality. They don't try to force a cookie cutter solution on you. They are not one-trick ponies. They will look at your business, and based on the unique particularities, they will recommend a specific method and tactic for you. The huge benefit of working with maybe somebody like us is that we have now worked with over 180 clients and counting, and we have now seen a couple of patterns, things that tend to work for the same type of clients. So if you were to work with us, you'll just buy yourself time. There will be fewer iterations that you have to do before you break through. And one of the topics that I talked about is how done for you work is so much easier to sell than pure coaching and advisory work. And if you have been coaching for a while and things haven't taken off for you yet, then I think you will like this next video.